So I had a good fortune of meeting Marcin in Poland last year around this time.
Okay.
Caught him between his job and his family dinner.
We met Marcin first at Thailand. That was 2018, I think. 18?
Yes.
18.
ISAGA Bangkok was.
And of course, at Warsaw, the year after that. On this panel, Marcin, you will see the faculty members of Sri Vaishnava University, who is hosting the ISAGA2021. And to all the visitors here on this panel, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Marcin, who was the chairperson of the immediately previous ISAGA conference at Warsaw, Poland. That was between the 26th of August and the 31st of August, Warsaw, Poland. And we had a very nice, cozy time out there. Welcome to this panel, Marcin. Thank you for coming. I hope you will add some conversation later. Jaga today will be presenting his piece today. We're waiting for the Vice Chancellor of the university, whom you met last time. He is the conference chairperson. You met Dr. Upinder Dhar, of course, to whom you transferred charge in Warsaw.
Yes.
He'll be here soon. Oh, Dr. Rishi Roy is coming here for the first time. Welcome.
It's approximately third or
no, I can't
fourth
hear
time
you.
I've been as. It was about third and fourth time I've been here as an panelist, but otherwise I was getting attendee link. I was there in attendees.
Okay. Okay.
And how are you doing, sir?
Marcin, would you like to? I'm sorry, all well, all well. Marcin was the previous conference chairperson.
Yeah.
Marcin, would you like to give us a couple of lines about what you might cover in your webinar?
My webinar? You mean the next?
Yeah, it will come someday. It will come someday. So I would like to, maybe you can give a preview without letting out the mystery.
Okay, because I am specializing with designing digital game-based learning. And basically my webinar is I would like to share with you my experiences on creating game-based learning, game-based programs with the use of technology. And I will go from the online technologies like web browsers, and I will move on to also.
Okay, that's an area that I think most of us have not confronted so far. That is the high-tech stuff that Jaga and I were speaking about before you came on the scene now. And I think we'll be excited to hear about it. Dr. Dubey, waiting. Dr. Guru Prasad, he's not here today. He's been quite a regular also.
He's an attendee, sir.
Okay. Jaga, we have 182 participants.
Great. So just let me know when we are ready to go, and then.
Just a moment. And Dr. Zubey, you need to put up that Q&A.
Yes, sir.
Maybe some people can get their questions ready. In fact, I have a question ready for Jaga, but I'll ask him at the end, after everybody is finished. Simple one, nothing out of the syllabus.
I'm going to make sure I extend up to 1 hour. Just speak through.
No, I think if you have time, we can go beyond the 4 o'clock deadline.
I should have known that is going to come from Vinod. Okay.
And Marcin, I spoke to Blashe today. He was rushing to a class. So I'll probably catch him around 8:30 India time. That should be, I think, 4 p.m. Warsaw time. We are planning to talk about, maybe I hope to get him here on this panel as well soon. I understand from his LinkedIn postings, he's an expert on the financial and the economic side. Is that right?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, Blashe is on the economics and finance side, simulations and games, right? I think that's what I hear.
No.
No?
No.
Something to do with banking, insurance, and stuff like that?
Yes, but not only. It's just like a small part of it.
Okay.
But it's much broader. It's mean we do all kinds of stuff.
Oh, that's good. That is a profile that seemed to come to me when I saw his LinkedIn posts. Of course, LinkedIn is a platform which we keenly watch. I see a lot of Claudia's postings there. Even Jaga's postings is pretty regular over there. And he is pretty articulate and clear in terms of what he wants to say. He had a post in the morning about one of his favorite authors.
Thanks to you for bringing me to that article.
No, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Oh, that's okay. But that
it was an interesting view about Bitcoin. The way Ray Dalio projected it, and yes. I like the way he articulated it. You know, he presented his authority without even presenting his authority. That was nicely
very
written.
Mild, very politely, yes. Very mildly.
Yes.
Without hurting anybody's feelings, in a manner of speaking. And also acknowledging that, well, I don't know much, but this is what I have to say, is what he said. I think that style of writing is something to be learned. It's not easy, because often when you write or you speak, sometimes your emotions get into it, and your past, what we call prejudice, also colors up your tone of communication. And the way he wrote, I'm sure many people would have edited it before it went on to the media. The way he wrote like a concerned person, a wise, a mature person. I mean, that's a style that we need to copy. Oh, here we have Elena. Welcome. She's not heard us so far.
Hello. Hello.
There she is. Elena, we hear you. We can't see you.
Okay. Nice to meet you again, even in this digital world.
Welcome, welcome. I think you have already met Marcin is here. Jaga is our speaker. And some of our panelists you already know because you have attended the sessions 2-3 times in the past, including yours. Dr. Dubey?
Yes, sir.
This is free. Any meeting going on?
Yes, sir. VC sir is in a meeting, and okay. Message from his office. He is joining in a few minutes.
Okay. Now we see you well now. And I hope we can get Dr. Kavtaratse here someday. Elena? I don't think she heard that. I don't think she heard that. I don't know whether Claudia and Jega know. Tyagi will be one of the speakers soon. I think you must have seen the webinar listings, the ISAGA website. So he'll be one of the speakers soon. And we have an interesting presentation coming from Mr. Pongchai from Thailand, that simulation gaming is really out of this world. It's a bit of tech, it's a bit of geography. Imagine geography and simulations. It's a mix of all that, and a lot of color and sensation all around the screen. I saw him about 4 years back, 2014 or 15, I think, in Bangkok, of course. And it was a very captivating presentation. We have him on the 22nd of June. I know it's a little far away, but I hope you'll all be there. I thought Toshiko would be here. Maybe she's busy. I'll see whether I can ask her. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
So, how is everybody? Our guest speaker has joined.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Mr.
Jega is here.
Hello, Dr. Binda. How are you?
I am fine. How are you?
I'm very well, blessed and highly favored.
Oh, very good. So, we can start the webinar?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Okay. So, welcome to all of you for the webinar on designing closed simulations for corporate learning under ISAGA 2021, the 52nd anniversary conference organized by International Simulation and Gaming Association and Shri Vaishnav Vidyapeeth Vishwavidyalaya, Indore. Before beginning the webinar, I would like to invite Dr. Upinder Dhar, Conference Chairperson, ISAGA 2021 and Vice Chancellor of Shri Vaishnav Vidyapeeth Vishwavidyalaya for the welcome address.
Good afternoon. At the outset, I would like to welcome our guest speaker, Mr. Jagdishwaran, and all other friends who have joined the webinar today from various countries. As we know that ISAGA 2021 will be held in the month of September 2021. And we are very much hopeful that by that time, conditions will be normal. COVID must have gone by that time. So all of us will be able to meet face to face. we thought that, well, how to remain connected with all the members of ISAGA. Therefore, we started this series of webinars last year in 2020. And so far, a number of experts, number of gaming professionals, gaming and simulation professionals have joined this series and made us better off in our understanding about gaming and simulation. So I'm sure that today also we will have the same experience. Mr. Jagdishwaran will be sharing his experience with us, and we'll be having more clarity on gaming and simulation. So not taking much time, I once again welcome Jagdishwaran to this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Before beginning the session, I would like to introduce, give a brief introduction about the speaker, Mr. Jagdishwaran Manoharan. He is a thought catalyst, team effectiveness consultant, business simulation designer, board member and trainer of North American Simulation and Gaming Association in Selangor, Malaysia. He is also a team effectiveness specialist, international speaker, and a game and simulation developer for adult learning and corporation learning for team effectiveness, customer experience, culture transformation, and leadership training. I once again welcome to Mr. Jagdishwaran Manoharan and request him to please start the session.
Right. Very good evening. Namaste. Vanakkam. And good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on which location you are located in. All right. So thank you very much for this invitation. Thank you very much, Dr. Vinod, the most persistent person who will invite anybody. You want to invite Krishna also, he will probably be able to do that, to come and give a speech. Okay. So he's very resourceful. So when he called and all, he said, please, could you please share? I would say, yes, definitely. All right. Anything for the community, anything for the community of ISAGA or NASAGA or any sagas around the world. So thank you for this opportunity. So what I'll do is that I'll straight away go to the our topic. So let me just do a screen share. Right. Okay. Can I have a confirmation that my screen is visible?
Yes.
Okay. No distraction, nothing. No, nothing over there. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to be discussing this topic on designing closed simulations for corporate learning. So let me just correct just one bit. I don't think Mrs. Bhupali was wrong about it, just that when I sent that content, I was still the board member of NASAGA. So I just finished my term in the last conference after 3 years. So right now I'm a member of NASAGA. Only, and it's been a great journey. So I came into the world of simulation and game from a context of proper learning, proper structure through NASAGA. So for those of you who are not familiar with NASAGA is the North American Simulation and Gaming Association, and I've attended 2 conferences over there, and it was fantastic. It was phenomenal. So last year it was an online conference, and I'm looking forward for this year. God willing, we will actually have a physical conference. So my background is actually more of designing simulation for the corporate world. Now, I'm not sure how different would it be from the academic world. So I'm seeing whole group of panelists here who are from the academic background. So it'll be nice to compare notes and see how it's different. So what I'm going to be sharing is my experience and my journey of designing games and simulation for the corporate market. So in corporate learning, there are a few other considerations that we take into account. So one of it is actually this, okay? The corporate world is a little different, as in like they have few demands that we need to fulfill. them. So one of the things about corporate learning is that they get a very targeted learning objective, and they are very specific. They tell us this is what we want you to cover, and this is the current problem we are facing, and it's very, very targeted, I think. So that's one of the understanding of the corporate market here. Is that the secondly is that it is also having very demanding learners. Okay, demanding learners is that if the game or simulation does not make sense in about 15, 20, 30 minutes, they will practically pack us up, turn us into panipuri and send us back home, you know. So that's the kind of demanding people that we have in the classroom. So the experience must make sense to them, and more important, the debrief or how we tie up must really make sense to them. Now, the other part is that the limited time for engagement. Now, the time factor is this. In corporate learning is that time is both our ally and also our adversary. So we are given 3 hours to do something. So that's an opportunity. But within the 3 hours, you're expected to come up with some valid outcome. So that really, it's a double-edged thing, you know, for us. So, and the secondly is that there's also, the last part is actually the high level of post-learning expectation from the client itself. They expect to see magic happening. So with all this, we need to make sure the simulation actually delivers something, delivers some level of impact for them. Okay, so let's go to this thing here. You know, this for those who are, because I see a wide range of attendees over there. Some of them are people whom I know, and they come from various backgrounds as well, from the corporate world as well as academic. So I'm just going to just quickly do this variation so that we really understand what we're talking about. So there was always this contention or this debate about what is an activity, game, and simulation. And we were going back and forth about this in the HR world. And somewhere a few years ago, Brian Bremer, who's a good friend of mine from ISAGA, and we were talking about it, and we just say, come on, the conference is coming, we need to come up with at least some form of definition that we can all agree upon. So in the last conference, we actually presented this in one of the masterclass that was conducted over there, and we defined it this way. That is, an activity is any learning strategy that gets learners to interact, challenge, theorize, reflect, plan, suggest, you know, something that they can actually use their thought process, as long as he has an activity around it. Okay, so if I were to give you an example of what we would say is that, let's say, for example, if I were to tell, okay, using 20 blocks of wood, can you all build a miniature house? Okay, so that activity allows people to go through the thought process and all that. But then it came about to what is a game then? So a game is basically a subset of an activity. It's an activity whereby there's an element of competition, element of playfulness and engagement, and it has to have rules and an endpoint to the game. The game must end somewhere, right? So when we put it in that context, an example would of that would be something like this. Using 20 blocks of wood, we like to find the fastest team that can build a miniature house, all right? So now you see, it's the same activity, but this time we have put an element of competition behind it. Then comes to simulation. Now in the HR world, these three words are constantly used without any discipline. You know, one thing I admire the academic world is that you have very clear definitions and all. But in the corporate world, it's a jungle out there. You know, anybody can call anything with any name. So even a simple activity, they call it a simulation and all. So we said, let's have a clear definition. So it took some thought process about it and tried to iterate with what is really happening in the world of simulation and all that. And here is what we think a simulation should be. A definition of a simulation, at least from the corporate perspective, is that any activity or a game. So it can be an activity of game that actually mimics the real world scenario. It should be able to mimic the real world scenario from either one or more of these three dimensions. Dimension number one, the thought process. In other words, if you can create a game within a safe, confined space that mimics or triggers the same kind of thought process that would happen in the real world, then we can call it a simulation. Or if we can trigger certain emotions that will actually come out in the real world, but we want to create scenarios within the safe environment where we want some level of this emotion to come out so that people will be aware that they actually have these emotions. So that would we call as a simulation as well. And the third one is quite known, which is actually the element of motor skills. Okay, so motor skills is known as a simulation because as long as we can recreate a motor skills in the classroom, we call it a simulation as well. Like there was one welding simulator that I saw in Thailand during a TVET exhibition over there, is that they have a simulator that actually how do you do a welding? So traditionally people do welding and they learn welding by doing welding. But sometimes it might be too expensive. It might be too, what do you say, laborious in terms of resources and all that. So what they did was there was a simulator that whereby you have to hold your hand and move it horizontally. And if you know what arc welding is, the rod of the arc welding shortens. So the real skill of a welder is actually to build that the ability to move the hand steadily, not only across, but also diagonally, so that the welding actually fits well. And if you see that way, the biggest value that we get out of a simulation is actually the feedback. So if I were to put it in a term over here is that you will buy, sell, exchange, produce your resources that will enable your team to build a miniature house with at least 20 wooden blocks. So this time they have to go and find their wooden blocks. How do they do it? They can buy, they can sell, they can exchange, a barter trade, or they can actually, if the simulation actually has an element where they actually go and chop trees, you know, in the game and turn them into resources. So all of this requires planning, requires thought process. It will create conflict, and that all, if it can, we can create that in a safe space, we'll call that a simulation. So why do we use that, and where is this whole thing heading to? In the corporate world, one of the things is, I think some of you have probably seen this. If your background is of learning or education or HR, you've probably seen this ladder before, where we call it the 4 stages of competence. So just for the benefit of those who are seeing this for the first time, I will just briefly tell you what this is. Any process, there's a theory on this 4 stage of competence, is that any process of learning goes through these 4 phases, anything. From learning how to drive, or learning to use a mobile phone, or learning a new skill at work, anything actually goes through these 4 phases. And the 4 phases is very simply saying that the first phase is unconscious incompetence. Unconscious incompetence means that I do not know, and I do not know about it, and I don't know how to do it. All right. So take, for example, a person has never seen a car before. Okay, they have not seen a car before, and obviously they do not know how to drive because they do not know of an existence of a thing called a car. So they're unconscious about an existence of a car, and they're incompetent about how to drive a car. So until they see a car, the moment they see a car, they generate something called an awareness. Now they have an awareness. Now they discover that there is a gap. You know what? There is something called a car, and I do not know how to use it. Right? So the moment the awareness comes in, immediately the motivation to go further in exploring it happens. And that's where awareness comes in. Imagine the time when we used to use button phones, and suddenly we migrated to smartphones. I mean, for a person who's been using button phones and they are all familiar with all the buttons on the phone, the day you give them a smartphone, they probably look at it as the first question will be, where are the buttons? And then when you show an iPhone with one button there, how do I make all the numbers, how do I dial all the numbers just with one button, right? Until somebody shows them how to do it. And when someone shows how to do it, that's where the learning process happens. And then, yes, now I know how to use a phone. Oh, now I know how to drive a car. I remember the time when I first drove a car, when I'm taking a roundabout, I had to tell everybody in the car to keep quiet. Nobody speaks. I'll turn off the radio. Why? Because Jega is taking the roundabout. So I do not want any distraction. Roundabout was one of the biggest fear. But after that, you get a hang out of it. The first day, go back to the time when you first day when you drove the car on your own, you came back, it was like a victory. You know what? I drove the car on my own. You probably even forgot that moment. But you will not wake up every morning feeling so excited, you know what? I can drive my car on my own. 10 years after driving, wake up in the morning and first thing you tell to yourself, I'm so grateful that I can drive the car on my own. I mean, there's so many things can be grateful for. But the thing is this, you will never feel the same kind of euphoria when you first learn it, because it has gone to the next level of conditioning, which is called unconscious competence. So conscious competence means I know the car exists and I know how to drive the car. But at one point, it goes to a level of unconscious competence whereby I don't even know the fact that I know how to drive a car. It's an automatic motor skill. I just know it. If I want to drive a car, I just go pick a car and drive. And in fact, it is when you come to that level of unconscious competence, you can do more than just driving a car. You can check your mobile phone, you can turn on the radio, you can argue with your spouse. There are so many things. You are basically a multitasker. Why? Because you have reached a level of unconscious competence. And research has shown that if you continue doing the texting and driving at the same time, you will reach level 5, which is called unconscious in the hospital. And then if that goes long enough, that will be level 6. It's called conscious in the afterlife. All right. So what we want to do is we want to stick to these 4 levels over here. Now, why am I showing these 4 levels here is that there is a gap that happens in the corporate learning world. Most corporate learning world, like it or not, is actually addressing this part here. Now, can I just have a feedback? Can you all see my pointer there, please? Yes? Okay, good. All right, good. Most corporate learning is actually happening at this level here, at the learning level. Why? Because the moment we run the training program, we assume that the participant is already here. They already know what they don't know, and they want to move up here. And most of the time, I can bet you in the corporate training, that doesn't really happen. How do I know that? Because have you ever attended a corporate training program and you hear them telling you this? They go and sit down there, they're listening to all the content, they're learning all the stuff about, let's say it's a motivational program or something like that. And the first thing that comes to their mind is, you know what? That lady who is working in my company, she should be attending this course. That dean in my faculty, they should be sitting down here. Oh, I wish my mother-in-law was listening to this. That we are always learning it from a perspective of who else should learn it instead of us learning. You know why? Because we never really had the realization that we needed to learn that. Because what's happening at this level is that we are learning things at an intellect level, at a head level. And we are expecting it to go into our subconscious. And subconscious can only come when you realize that, okay, now I need to learn this, and I've learned this, and I continue practicing it. But for that to happen, we need to first drop that learning from here to down here. We need to bring the participants who thinks that they are here into down here to make them realize that, hey, there's still some part here that you do not know yet. We need to recreate that awareness. Because it's only when we create that, you create an emotional effect in the learner. And when the emotional effect is created within the learner, then any content that you give, they are more on a receiving mode. The reason is this, we only have 3 hours to create a magic in the classroom. So if we go there straight with the content, they are going to have what you call as head knowledge. They are not going to learn the hard part of it. So this is where simulation comes very, very handy, and a right design of it can actually create magic for this part to happen, for the conditioning part to happen, right? So let's just go to the whole thing about simulation here. We call it a fidelity spectrum. In simulation, we have what we call as high fidelity simulation and low fidelity simulation. Now, high fidelity simulations are simulations which are close enough to the real world scenario. That means it has a lot of links to the real conditions of the real world. Low fidelity it may have the thought process. So once again, low fidelity doesn't mean bad. Low fidelity means it still triggers the thought process. It still triggers the emotion or the motor skill. Now in corporate, motor skill doesn't come into play so much. It is always the thought and the emotion. It triggers these two areas, but the condition or the scenario, the game theme is so far away from the real world. So a high fidelity would be like an aircraft simulator. If you look at an aircraft simulator, it is super high fidelity. You make a mistake in the aircraft simulator, the aircraft simulator will vibrate just like how a real aircraft would vibrate. Okay, if they simulate a certain fog, you won't be able to have visibility just like the real aircraft. So the purpose of that is because to practice in a way where to condition them to have competence in almost every situation, so it becomes second nature to them. Now, what we'll call a low end of it, the low fidelity. The low fidelity will be something like live action role play. If you're familiar with a LARP thing, live action role plays are low fidelity. Some thematic business simulation, like business board games, are low fidelity simulation. Okay, so they can actually, there is no specific thing to say where they are, but they travel along this spectrum between high to low. So like for example, if you have a financial board game or a financial computer simulation, there's one called SimVenture. And this SimVenture simulation is that, if you look at that simulators, that the relationship, the financial relationship between liability, cost, and asset and income and all this, everything has its similar relationship as what a real world is. However, the scenario that they'll be playing will be something totally different. They might not be simulating their same factory. For example, if you're a bottle drink packaging bottling company, the simulation that they are going through maybe is a bicycle factory, right? So that's where it becomes a medium level simulator. So that brings us to that question about open and close. Why are we using closed simulation, and why do we prefer using closed simulations for corporate is that? So first, let's just explain what open is. For many of us, we already know this, but for the benefit of you here, open simulation means basically the outcomes does not have any control. Anything can happen in the outcome. The outcome could be something which is not part of your design of the simulation. Not only the outcome, the input, in other words, the decision a player takes within that simulation might be controlled, might not be controlled. In other words, you can make rules for them that in a game, okay, these are the only things you can do, but the outcomes can be anything, or you can just say you can do anything you want over here. Now, example of that is, you see the picture over there that was taken in Reno, Nevada in 2017, I think. Yeah, 2017 ISAGA. So that was one simulation that we did there, which was supposed to be a disaster, post-disaster action. As a government, what can we do in a post-disaster situation? So we simulated a post-disaster scenario there, whereby we created a few disruptions that is happening after that. We had an oil rig on fire. We had Russian troops coming in offering help. And then we had a scenario where there was public unrest. And then the hospitals were overwhelmed. So these were multiple things that was built into the simulation. And we were supposed to find a solution. Now that's an open simulation because we can decide, just like what we will decide in a normal world. And the thing is, you must trust that design. You must trust that that system will balance it, because sometimes people say, if it's open, how do people decide? Well, one party's decision will be counted by another party's decision. So you must make sure that the design in such a way that you trust that the system will balance it off, okay? There is benefit to this, especially if you are trying to find out, you want to experiment and discover what are some possible outcomes. For example, current scenario like the pandemic, you want to take certain government policy, this is what you call as a so-called most unprecedented situation. We could do a simulation for that and look at what are the real world data that we can bring into the simulation and try to put what would people do if we were to open up the borders. Or what would people do if we keep closing the borders? So the outcome we just do not know, but it will be a good discovery. Okay, it helps us to gain a deeper understanding about something. Like, for example, if it's a trauma emergency scenario, this happened in one state that we have in Malaysia, where we constantly have a flood. So there were people who actually went to help post-flood situation and bringing food and all to them. And what happened was they got a shock, because they are some of the nicest people, but in this particular scenario they had was, as they brought the food, their trucks were attacked. And people just got into the truck, took all the thing, and they could not distribute it in a proper order. And this is because people have not eaten for days. They are in a different state. We cannot judge them. In fact, we should empathize. So to have a deeper understanding about something, the open simulations will become very, very handy for that, right? So that takes us to the other one, closed simulation, which is our topic, or what we intend to discuss here. Now, closed simulations basically is the outcomes are fixed. Within the game, there's only certain outcomes, which is good because we can control what comes out of the game. Especially if you only have about 3 hours to make sense. In a classroom, closed simulations become very, very handy. All decisions are set. They cannot make a decision outside that design. And most of the time we use this for learning and classroom learning. Those financial board games, most business simulation falls under the closed simulation. So getting to the topic of this, how do you go about designing this? Now, design is a very, very interesting journey, I would say. So what I want to do is, I would like to share with you certain steps that we take in making that sort of worked for us. All right, sort of worked for us. And let's see if you can actually take this, and if in your own design, whether it will be applicable or not. So we call this design consideration, not so much of design steps. The reason is because there is no steps to design. Design is it's not a systematic process. It's a creative process. So we have few considerations, but the consideration may not work in a particular order. So let's just share a little bit about this. A lot of times, when we start a design, let's say a problem statement comes from the client, and the client will tell us, okay, we have this situation in our company, right? So I want you to cover leadership. We want them to learn about communication. We want them to learn about customer service. And if we ever start any design with those knowledge, it will be disaster. Okay, they will just come and tell us this. These are the required knowledge. I want them to learn about going the extra mile. I want them to learn about taking initiative and all. And we never want to trust that first word that was told by the client. If we take the first word and design, we are going to spend a lot more time. You'll come up with a lot more surprises. So what we always suggest is that we go 2 steps backwards. And in most HR people are already doing it. Most trainers are already doing it. That is to go 2 steps backwards and ask this question first. What's the learner's background? So when it comes to designing, elements of design thinking will be handy, but you do not have to become a design learning practitioner. Okay, so let me just clear that. I'm not suggesting you need to become a design learning practitioner, but you need to have that design thinking practitioner, design thinking mindset. And the design thinking mindset starts with this thing called empathy with them. Okay, you define first, but after that, you're going to have this empathy. And we want to develop empathy. We want to develop a persona about who is the player who is going to go through this simulation. Because what they might, they might say that I want them to do this and this, but what are their current realities? What are the current environmental conditions that these learners are in the real world that is preventing them from doing certain things? Okay, you say like, I want them to be actively delivering customer service. Yeah, okay, fine. What is happening right now that's not making them deliver customer service? What's the scenario? What are the events that has happened that made you conclude that they need customer service? And they will give you more information. We would like to download as much as possible. And then it goes to the second one. This is the most important thing. Not to say we don't trust the HR people, is that the problem with HR people is they are very quick to conclude something. So let that conclusion be done by us who are going to be designing, but let them tell us what is that their outcome is. And their outcome should not be in this area. The outcome that we should dig out from them is here, the intended practice. What are they expecting to practice after this training? So in other words, after them going through this training, what is that we want them to practice in their workplace? So if they say, okay, you said about leadership, what is that about leadership that you want them to practice over there? Okay, I want them to take charge and be responsible. Oh, okay, that leadership. Because the thing is this, words like leadership, communication, teamwork, oh man, this is such a wide spectrum word. You just do not know where to start. So we would like to go deep down and ask them, okay, talk about customer service. What is that? What is currently happening? What do you want them to do? So there was once we were conducting one workshop for a college, private college, and they said, we want our front lines to be customer oriented. So we asked them, okay, what do you mean by customer oriented? You want them to go the extra mile. Okay, very good. What do you mean by extra mile? What is that? Oh, currently, we have 2 admin office, and what happens is they sometimes give the wrong information to the people. And because they give the wrong information, these people are actually sending the parents who are coming to sign up for courses to the wrong building, and the parents are getting frustrated. Before we can even have the business, they're getting frustrated. Okay, fine. Now we understand deeper. So once we understand that deeper part, we should not be letting them tell us what is the required knowledge, but we should be deriving the required knowledge from the intended practice. So let's say the intended practice is we want them to direct customers to the right place. Okay. So next question we should be asking is, what must they learn or know to produce this practice? What are the theoretical knowledge that they should be learning in order to produce this particular practice? So, okay, they should be learning about going the extra mile. Okay, I want them to value customers. Okay, value customers. How do you want them to value customers? I want them to see customers. Okay, the practice that I want is I want them to see customers as the reason why we are in existence. Okay, very nice. So that means we need to show them how their salary is actually being contributed by that customers. So that is something that they need to learn. So these are the kind of theoretical lessons that we will derive based on the practice that they have already told us. So the moment we have all this, now we can go to the next phase. So it's always good to actually jot down and write, okay, what do they need to learn? So this is where those learning models can come in. Those leadership models can come in. But the thing is this, it should only come in after this part is done. A lot of times we are trying to fit in a leadership model here, and then we are trying to engineer this. And in simulation, maybe in classroom, you can wing it. In a lecture-based classroom, you can wing it. But in a simulation design, it will not work this way. All right. So once we have already got this part, then we go to the next phase. The next phase is actually going straight into the game design itself. That is to ask this, the game experience. So if I know that these are the elements that they need to learn, if I know that these are the practices that they are going to be doing, and these are the current background of it, now we can ask this question: what must the learners experience in the game for them to grasp that required knowledge? What must they experience? So this is where the design team starts brainstorming, or and nowadays we have all kind of new terminology for brainstorming, whatever the thing is, but it's brainstorming. Okay, so you can actually do the brainstorming about what should the game experience be like. okay, in the game experience, I want the players to experience that if they don't gather this number of customers, it will affect their income, the team score. Okay, fine. All right. So we will write that down. If they don't gather this number of customers, this number of what is that? Yeah, let's call it customers. Okay, they will actually lose out some points or something like that. Secondly is if they go extra and do something for them, they will actually gain more points. All right, so that all comes into this. But this is where we need to understand. That is why we always ask this question. You see, it's not that the players do not know how to do this in the real world. But the reason why they are not doing it is because there might be something here that we might be missing out. And it is important for us to understand what is the learner's background, what is the story behind it. There could be some boundaries. For example, when you're dealing with the banks are heavily regulated. So even a branch manager wants to do something out of sheer will and wanting to do the best for the customer, but the regulators may not allow it. If you do it, it's non-compliance, and you can be fined for it, and it can be very expensive. So once we understand that, can we build these challenges? Can we build these realities? Can we build these boundaries into the game? So that now the players will have to think, okay, I want to get more score, but then I'm also going to have to deal with this. So now we have a scenario, we have a game experience that we can actually think about. Then we take that experience to the next level, gameplay. What must the learners do in the game? Now in this part, I'll very quickly tell about something, because the reason is what I'm giving you in about 30 minutes or less is basically 1.5 days of real thought process, real you have to sit back and digest this info. But very simply, a gameplay is, think about this, very simple, is that what game should they play so that they can actually have this experience? So one of the easiest way is take existing games which are available. Okay, you can start with all the simple games that you have there, like whether it's a Monopoly, although it's personally I don't like the game Monopoly and all that, and but you can take that as a form of inspiration to start somewhere. Could you build all those things that you mentioned here in terms of game experience onto a Monopoly board? That will be a good place to start. Okay, can we do this? Okay, let's say customers. Okay, can we create scenarios? Can we turn some of the boxes into customer boxes so that they will actually look forward to go and get that? Okay, can we create some of it that they cannot go and take these customer boxes? Why? Because there are certain boundaries that can be built inside here. Right? So then we have a more or less some level of idea of a game. Now here comes the most important part. The most important part is going down to action, which is prototype. And we say roll out quickly and make incremental refinement. Do not try to perfect the game. So I kind of like this the line that is used by Transformers. Not the new Transformers. If some of you are familiar with the cartoon version of Transformers back in the 80s, I'm not sure in India were they having that cartoon Transformers, but it's available online right now. Optimus Prime says something there that is not said in the new movie. At that point, Optimus Prime will say this, Autobots transform. And that's the only thing where we have the modern one, they've only heard that. But there's something else that he says there, which is very, very profound. He says, Autobots transform, roll out. And rollout is very, very important. In game design, what we want to do is, the most important thing is okay, you might take some time getting this, you might get this, but this part, you need to quickly come up with a very quick prototype and roll it out very quickly. Roll the prototype out very quickly so that you will get some idea about what works and what doesn't work. Now, I said just now, this was the design consideration. Why we say design consideration? Because in the ideal world, this would be a perfect thing. But in a real world, I'll tell you, this is what really happens. You will start one place, you'll go to another place, and then you'll come back, and then you'll go back, and it will be a jungle. And if some of you are designing games and you're probably experiencing this, it's okay, you are normal, right? So if you're going through this and you perfectly found a way to think, okay, maybe it was a lucky break, but if you're keeping doing that all the time, same thing, that means probably something is not going right. Okay, so but if it, unless the game is very simple, if the game is very simple, you will not go through too many iteration. But if you're taking time to develop a simulation that will go on for about 2 hours, and you want some deep discussion points and all, it will be taking some time. One thing I would like to warn about design, this is some mistakes that we have done in the past, is okay, before that, I'll just show you this thing. And these are some of the pictures that we do in terms of prototype. Do prototype quickly. You know, like look at this. What we use actually recycled papers. You know, any wall in the place will be turned into a design space there. So we have a design room where we design our games, and the back of our office. That's the back of our office, and that's where the guys test some of the simulation, because we need to test. Just because it works well in our head, we never want to take it to a classroom. So sometimes we need to test, and that picture that you see up there was one of the failed tests. It was during the test we found out that it was one of the most ridiculous games that we ever done, and we just discarded it. We never wanted to even go near it. But you know, you will never know until you test. And failing in the test is normal. You will fail in the test. A lot of times when people see the success of a particular product out there, they only see the success. Oh, look, this is so nice, but they have not seen the multiple failures and amount of resources wasted in the back. It's not wasted, it's invested. I would call it an invested resource. So this is something that I would like to highlight a little bit. These things can happen in a game design. We call it game stalling. So game stalling is basically this. You went through the design and you started. This is the simulation development, okay, the progress, and this is the time. In the beginning, it will be slow. And at one point, it will start picking up. You will start having this momentum where you are starting to put in ideas. Oh, you know what? Hey, let's change this game. Let's do this. Hey, you know what? Let's create an element where they can actually negotiate with other companies. Oh, right, that's very fantastic. Let's try that. And then they will start putting in all kinds of stuff. They will create so much complexity. At one point, you will go into like a twilight zone. It's like it will just happen all of a sudden in the design process. You'll happen all of a sudden. It's like, actually, what are we designing? That's the question they'll come. You know, what are we really doing here? That is what we call as game stalling. And the moment that happens, the motivation drops, the focus drops, and then that's where you find some of the games actually will stay on the shelf or inside your computer for years, like mine. So if I open my folder, I have a lot of games that has already stalled in the past. So we are very careful about that game stalling part. So what we want to do is that quickly take a game. The moment you are getting the euphoria, the moment you are getting excited of putting stuff, stop there. Whatever you have put it to immediate test. And where can you test it? I mean, test it with your friends. Test it with students. You know, we have a lot of college students that do part-time with us, and we always tell them, hey guys, we got to test a game, you know, would you like to come? And they are more than happy to come. And anything about games, they will be here. And we also have trainers that we test. Okay, so here what happens is that the moment you do the testing, this is what happens. The moment you start getting a bit of euphoria, test it. And then you'll start realizing. And testing, sometimes why people do not want to do frequent testing is it's laborious. it is a ping, because like, no, come on, man, I have all these ideas, no, test it first. The moment you test it, you'll start finding some of the mechanics won't work well, and you can refine it, and then test again, test again, test again, test again, and then you will start seeing completion. We have done it this way, we have done it this way, okay, and this way ended up this way, and this way ended up successful in what we do. So, and where can we test it? So these are some places that where we have tested before. Use conferences. I mean, ISAGA is a nice place to test. If you have some ideas and all that, make an appointment to be at ISAGA next year. Or if there's any other conferences, thing at Masaga, I'm not sure about Masaga this year yet, depending on how the pandemic is. But if you have an idea, it will be nice to take it to the conferences and test it. So what we did was we had one idea and we took it to a conference. And the purpose, this one thing for those of you who are new to ISAGA and all that, you need to understand ISAGA is not a place for us to just showcase what works. It is also a place for us to prototype and get feedback from other attendees. Guys, I've developed it and this is what it is. Could you all give me some feedback? And the only thing is when you come to ISAGA, at least there must be some level of internal testing before we get feedback from others. And sometimes we actually invite friends over. And you have trusted people, you can actually invite trusted people who you are okay about sharing your ideas and all. And this is one thing that is different from the corporate world and academic world. I find the academic world is very much open to sharing. The corporate world and those who design games for corporate, they are very secretive about what they do, and they are very intellectual property, copyright, all kinds of stuff. They are so much into that area. Nothing wrong, because that's their rice bowl. So, but the thing is, even with that, you can actually find trusted people, good people that you can actually test games with them. Right. So, so the most important thing is this: for us to actually understand what is the outcome that we really want from this whole thing, and how fast we can roll out. The more testing done, and going back to that draft which I put over here, or this diagram here, the moment you actually do the prototype and you do the testing there, then you'll start coming back here. You'll change the game experience. And then, and this is what also happens when you refine the game experience. You will start discovering not only this, you can also address other lessons over there, which is good. Then now this product or the game can be even used for other purpose. There's one thing I would advise about in terms of design. Let me just see how much time. Okay, all right. Okay, I'm on time. So the one thing I would like to bring about whenever you're designing games, especially in the corporate world, you see, if we are doing a semester-long academic thing, we have time. Let's say if it's a semester-long simulation, like for example, SimVenture being used in a semester-long degree program or a master's program, we have time. But in a 3-hour session or a 1-day or a 2-day workshop, we don't really have that much time. So the most important thing is about design is that the question that we need to ask here, let me just stop the screen share first. Hang on.
Hello.
Okay, hang on. All right. So the most important thing is, when it comes to time, time is one element that we really want to consider here. The time factor here is that how much time does it take for people to learn the game? Because if we have a 3-hour session, and out of the 3-hour session, maybe an hour is allocated for the lessons. So we have a 2-hour experience, and you want them to go through a 2-hour experience. How fast must they learn the game before they can learn from the game? So this happened once in one setting whereby they created a particular game and gave it to the participants. And as they were doing that, what happened was the game was, the time given to us was like 20 minutes to complete it. So somewhere around like the 6th minute or 7th minute, somebody got an idea and they understood how the gameplay worked. And they said like, hey, you know what? I think I get it. I get it. We need to work together. I think there's something that I cannot do without your piece. I got to work with you. So it was like a jigsaw puzzle thing. So what happened was in the debrief, the trainer who was doing it told this. It's like, oh, you took about 7 minutes to figure it out. Why didn't you figure this out earlier? Now, in a corporate setting, that can be a very dangerous debrief. Because if we rig the game in a way where you do not give the player enough time to make sense out of the game and try to debrief based on that, like I said earlier, they will turn us into panipuri and send us back home. All right, so they will be vicious. They will, or for the sake of machin, they will turn us into pierogi and send us back home. All right, so that's their official favorite dish in Poland. So so what we want to do is in ISAGA we have this saying: if it takes time for people to learn the game, when will they learn from the game? So when we look at the game, we want to give time for people to first learn the game. They must be familiar with the game. Then only can we say that they are going through a process of learning from the game. But if it takes half a day to actually learn the game, and then, okay, guys, it's done and all that. All right. So what did you learn from it? The guy is going to end it. Corporate world, they're very blatant, you know. What do you want me to do? I just found out how the game works. And how can you hold us accountable of not doing this or not doing that? So we always take into account in terms of time. So whenever you design a thing, let's say in the gameplay, it takes about 2 hours to play the game. In for 2 hours, we have a rule called a 1/3 rule. Anywhere between 25% to 1/3 of the time. That's the maximum of them being onboarded into the game. So in further design, as you get the design, you want to simplify the design in a way whereby it takes fast for people to learn the game, so that people can actually get the hang out of it. They know the process, they know the mechanics. Okay, these are the decisions which are allowed, these are decisions not allowed. If I make this decision, this will happen. So now they are ready to play the game. Okay. So with that, I'd like to thank you for this. If there's any question or what, I would like to open it up and be willing to take some questions.
Hello, sir.
Can I?
Okay.
This is Dr. Bandal, please.
Yeah. That is, I think, very nicely explained and very briefly, although you said it's a 3 days topic or something like that. And in 35, 40 minutes, or maybe 45 minutes, you really given a very good insight of, particularly application of simulation and gaming in learning. My question is in a very, elementary, in the sense that, as I said, in corporate, a lot of people use these words interchangeably: activity, games, and simulation, while imparting, learning initiatives. Is there any way as to, or what kind of learning, which particular thing you should use, or is it an open kind of phenomenon? Number one. Number two, can you throw some light on the effectiveness of learning vis-a-vis the three, use of three things: activities, games, and learning? I remember, there was a faculty, when a long time back, who used to take 3 hours just to, instill what is teamworking and, trust and teamworking, something like that, by making a group and then let one tie a handkerchief, around the eyes of one person, and the person without any touch, without any feel, he can only ask question, would be guided to the entire campus, say climbing stairs, up and down and going different places, and report back after 3 hours. And the the feedback of this particular exercise was extremely good. I believe that's a kind of game because a lot of fun involved in it. You could do similar things in classroom as well. That's the reason I'm asking this particular question. The classroom activity could as well be converted into a game, if not a simulated exercise. Coming back to my question, very fundamental question, is there any evidence as to which one is more effective, especially for competency development or behavioral improvement? And the other question was, under what circumstance, which one is better? Is there any guideline or do you recommend anything?
Okay. Okay. We're getting a feedback somewhere. Can you hear me? All right, great. Okay. The first one, I didn't quite get the first part here. Is there a way to use games? Are you talking about any particular ways, or particular games are more effective than others? Is that what the question is?
No. The one is there any rule or thumb rule or kind of study which suggests that you should use certain things, in certain places, games, and certain places, simulations? I'm talking about learning. That is the number one.
Okay, fine. Whether there's any studies behind it, okay, this is one thing I want to reveal to you about the corporate world. The corporate world is a very, it's a world where evidence is not required for something to be done, which is so much different from what the academic world is. So in the corporate world, it's about this, whether it makes sense. For us, it's very much outcome immediately after the program. Do people feel that they can act, that they learn something? Do they say that they can actually apply something that they have learned? But this has always been a hot topic about measurement, how effective it is. The challenge we have in corporate thing is that we don't have much opportunity to measure unless you have the client's cooperation in that. So when we talk about which is the better way, which we should use games or which we use simulation or what, for us, this is how it is. We need to use a process of learning. And we do not want to get so caught up in whether to call this a game or a simulation. Sometimes some of it, we call it a game, but actually when you really look at it, it triggered the emotion, it triggered the thought process, you can actually call it a simulation. So for us, it's very much as to, does this process help you to create the outcome that you want to create? If it helps, let's just do it. So if the method is not really a game, but a storytelling method, let's talk about a storytelling. In fact, in ISAGA, we were doing a lot storytelling activities. If we can use a storytelling activity to get the message across, then let's use a storytelling method to get the message across. If we feel that a game will get the message across, let's just use the game to take the message across. Now, the second one I talk about in terms of the time taken and the suitability of activity, if I'm interpreting it correctly, this is one thing, a rule of thumb here is that the length of a game must justify the quality of lessons that is being learned. So you do not need a long game or a long simulation to actually tell about one element. So, for example, you're talking about going the extra mile, just that. And if somebody has to go through 2 hours of simulation just to learn going the extra mile, that may not go very well, right? But so why do we play a short game or a long game? So the depth of learning has got nothing to do with the length of the game. A game can be very short. You can do a 10 minutes activity, but you can have an hour discussion just on the 10 minutes activity. You can go very deep in it. So the depth of it has got nothing to do with the length of the game. However, if you have a lengthy game, let's say about an hour or 2 hours game, then that game must provide multiple variety of lessons at the end of it. So it's not so much of depth. Depth has got nothing to do with length or duration of the game. But length or duration of the game has got direct result towards the variety of lessons. So when we are going through a 2 hour simulation And after that, we are spending another 2 hours or maybe a half a day after that, talking about the various elements, and we are referring back to what happened in the simulation, then I think it's worthwhile doing it. Okay. Another thing is, if we are running a simulation that goes beyond 2 hours or 3 hours, there are some simulation board games that goes up to about a day or day and a half. Because they have to, it's a lengthy thing, you know, you're building a factory production and all, it's something to do with finance and all. So if it goes beyond 3 hours, then the debrief has to come in between. It has to be in phases, because it will be very counterproductive to just do one entire day of simulation and then the next day to spend about 2 hours. This is where sometimes HR will start questioning us. Do you need to go through that entire day of experience just to deliver this much? But if we are going through an entire day, but every 2 hours the game stops, we are having a discussion, and then we're going to go back to the next phase of it, and then we're stopping, we're going to have another discussion, then that way people are okay about it. So you have multiple intervals of the lessons to cover within that duration of time.
I was thinking that, you know, since in simulation, and again talking in respect of learning, in simulation, since you have always an emotional, you know, engagement of learner, be it simulation of a control room operator, you know, a highly centralized distributed data control system operator, or a person who's undergoing a behavioral training, you are engaging him emotionally. So therefore, retention of learning would be better in case of simulation rather than, you know, gaming, and definitely better than activity, if I am correct.
Yes, yes, correct. I would agree with that.
Thank you.
Now I invite Dr. Marcin for his comment or any question.
Sir, I have a question. First of all, sir, I would like to tell that it was very informative and engaging session for all of us. Um, Sir, my question is, how does simulation would enhance employee engagement at workplace? I mean, whatever gaming processes or the learning processes we are going through, how does it help in enhancing the employee engagement, one? And the second part of my question is, can it be really measured? I mean, pre-game gaming and post-gaming, I mean, like that.
Okay. Question one is on employee engagement. How can it be? How does it affect employee engagement? If you ask me, simulation alone affecting employee engagement, I do not know if there's any research or anything that can back that up. If you ask me about classroom engagement, yes, simulation has effect on classroom engagement, but classroom engagement does not mean it is going to create a highly engaging employee unless that employee engagement elements is built into as the lesson for that. Okay, if it comes into part of the lesson, then yes. Okay, why I say this is because this happens in some organization. They have something called employee engagement survey. You know, this Q12, Gallup's Q12 or Tower Perrins or any other consulting house, they have their surveys. And sometimes what they do is they don't tell them when they're going to do it, because the managers are very good. They will know how to rig the system and prepare the employees for it. So it comes suddenly. It will just come. You do not know. So some department will go through it in January, some will go through in August, and so they will not have a specific time. But some managers are very good. They know when is it, because it's already month of August. They need to do it. So what they do is they get everyone and organize a team building. Why? By organizing a team building, we get a feel-good factor. Everybody is engaged and all that, hoping that the team building will actually change the employee engagement survey data. Now, it may have a temporary effect, okay? But if the manager has been screwing up big time, let me tell you, nothing is going to help, okay? The survey is going to show the truth, okay? It's not going to be helpful. Now, the second one is about measurement. Now, measurement, like what I said just now, this is one thing that is really lacking in the management work. In the management world, the element of measurement is not just simulation. Training per se, measurement on training per se is still a very it's a difficult thing because of certain parameters that cannot be managed, cannot be measured well. And that's only one part. But even that, the L&D space has actually developed ability on how we can actually measure certain things. But the challenge is, like what I said just now, the cooperation from the client to actually measure it. Unless you do a control experiment and all. But I find all those control experiments are superficial in nature. It just because you do it in a controlled environment and you get it, that doesn't mean in reality it's going to work in the same way. So it's the challenge of measurement of simulation. I would really say the challenge is not the measurement of simulation or any process. The challenge on training itself, measuring training effectiveness, and that is why there was one article that came out. I can't recall which publication was it. It was a very prominent one where they said in America how many billion was actually being wasted for corporate training, because they say all this money is being spent, but things are what's the result? And this what's the result has always been a constant debate. That there is no way of telling what's the results. There are some people who claim that they have, I mean, we have done some workshops, we have measured, but it was a customer experience measurement, which is easy to measure. Sales, very easy to measure. So those kind of things were very easy to measure. But when you talk about like leadership, about teamwork, there are parameters, but getting the data for it is where a bulk of the challenge is. Thank you, Dr. Richard, for that question.
Now I invite Dr. Marcin for his comments or any questions if he have.
Hi, first of all, Jega, very interesting presentation. I also agree with what you have been doing. I have just, let's say, 2 remarks and then 1 question on the end. So first of all, I also have like a group of games that I have, and I call it freezer. It means all those games that came to the stalling place and they are somewhere in the folder called freezer. And maybe sometimes I will take out something from the freezer, but in most of the cases they stay there forever. So and rapid prototyping is very nice, but the problem with the rapid prototyping is it has also some negative aspects. It means some very complex and complicated problems that we sometimes ask to portray in the games or solve need really deliberate engagement and in design. And in many cases, these are very hard to create through the rapid prototyping process, because they require a very deliberate picture of the problems from the real world. So as the complexity of the problem gets higher, the usefulness of the rapid prototyping process drops. As the rapid prototyping is excellent, if we have to create engaging short-term exercises and games for a particular very well-defined problem, then this is excellent way to start from the scratch and come up with a solution in a very fast and also in a very successful manner in many ways. But as the problems get more complex and more complicated, then the rapid prototyping in many cases leads to the wrong assumptions, and then we basically sell something that is very shallow and in reality does not address the problem. And it's of course much more harder to create large-scale complex games and simulations, because they take usually a lot of time. Sometimes I work on projects that take years to create. And of course, there is a completely different set of problems then. But I completely agree with you that, and I also working with many corporations that they are very focused on short-term gains. They are not really interested in the long-term process of developing. Not all of them, but majority of them, they want something to have that works right here and now. And of course, this catching them and measuring the effectiveness of it, which how they really is affecting the workplace and the, let's say, experience of the workers and the customers, it's very illusional to catch, because we don't really know what is happening in the long-term process. This is very, very difficult to achieve. We can only measure what is happening during the workshop in this room, basically. So this is basically a little bit my take on what you've been saying. And I have one question to you, is that
Yes.
you were talking about time as the help and the enemy, and I didn't catch the idea. Can you a little bit explain this? How do you understand this timing and framing this into time process? Because I think I had a confusion between the design, the time for design process, and the time for actual conducting the exercise.
Okay, Marcin. Yeah, okay, I got everything. Thanks for that feedback. And I think, yes, you're right. The rapid prototyping for large stuff, especially really large things, those are almost high fidelity simulations. You cannot prototype it until you have the inputs in place. And gathering the inputs and putting the relationship together does really take time. I definitely know that bit of it. The question just now about time here, the time here is the play time, not the design time. We're talking about the play time. So if we are giving 2 hours for them to play the game, so if I take about 25% of that, that's like 30 minutes. So in 30 minutes of gameplay, they must be able to get a hang out of the game and what are the do's and don'ts and what they can be done, what can't be done. Because I've also seen some people, sometimes when the games become too even simple games, almost towards the end of the game, they said, "Oh, you mean I can do that?" Yeah, I thought you knew it all the while. So we are having that kind of players. So that is why sometimes simplicity of the game is actually very, very important as well. So that the time taken for them to learn the game is reasonable for them to then play the game and learn from the game. So we call it learn the game and learn from the game. So that's the understanding of time there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, I see there are some questions on the, that's more of
Yes, sir. Can I read the questions for you?
Yeah, I can read it. I'm seeing one from Tin Molly here. Is it more of an application and the result in a short or long term, in my understanding? Okay, I think that's a statement. Hawk is saying that there are many trainers who claim that they are great at experiential gamification, okay, or whatever they call it, okay, but in Malaysia, all right. So that's that's a very unhappy Malaysian HR person about because been disappointed in the past, okay. But I have found many. Hang on. Why did that question go? Hold on. Okay, all right, I got it.
Okay.
Then, right, hang on, I got it. But I have found that many are just using it to get contract. Then there are certification that we can rely on to distinguish gems from the fraud. No, I'm sorry, Hawk. I do not want to take the world of game design into the world where only if you're certified you can design games. I think that should not be it. The world of game design has always been a free thing. Anybody should be able to do it. And you'll be surprised. Sometimes the person who is new, they might come up with something brilliant. So, and doesn't mean a person who is certified is really good at it. I've known somebody who was certified in emotional intelligence. Right after that, I got an email, a really nasty email from this person who just finished an emotional intelligence certification. So the certifications and all that, they may produce some structure, they may produce some understanding. But I have had people who go through learning game design certification, the one that we do in Malaysia. only a handful of them actually do game design. Many of them don't explore the game design part. So I don't think there is a way. The only way is word of mouth, and the only way is your own experience with them. So Purpal has one here. Okay, but Purpal was actually a statement, okay? Just to know the question by the kind lady, I believe he's talking about Dr. Rishu here. Employee engagement can be increased by gamification if the company uses apps that is linked to onboarding, company communication, performance management. Okay, that is one thing, not the simulation, but gamification is something that is being looked at in HR. Once again, there isn't very strong case study for this because gamification is very new, and the only people who are telling gamification works are the ones who are selling gamification solution. So that's the only people who are saying that it really works, as much as the ones who are doing simulation says the simulation only works, you know. So usually we tell people to take it with a pinch of salt. The most important thing is this: as clients are using something, we need clients to really think through. Does this make sense? Does it make sense from your perspective in your organization, knowing your learners? Would they be able to comprehend this and do things after going through such a simulation or a workshop? There's a question here by Dimitri. Do you check barriers that are sometimes impossible to overcome by teachers? Some are not able to use simulation again. Very good statement there by Dimitri. This is where the empathy comes in. If you notice the first part of that design, we talked about understanding the environment. So that also means what are some of the constraints that they have in order to do simulation. For example, right now we are having a huge problem with that, because all our training has gone online, and we do not want to be the talking head. I mean, today is a talking head because it's a webinar, and it's limited to about an hour or so. But imagine you're doing a 3-hour workshop or a 7-hour workshop, talking head. The computer will be alive. Either the participant or the trainer might die, you know, in that process, you know, because of the fatigue that you go through. So what we do is we created certain experiential learning things that can be done online. But then we realized technology is not on our side. Just the other day, I was doing one session of team engagement using MS Teams. Now, I have all respect for Microsoft. Okay, I'm not against Microsoft, but let me tell you, MS Teams, for experiential learning, at least the one which I'm conducting, this is my personal view, I'm not putting down the software itself, it does not fulfill the needs that we want to do. It is horrible. It's a torture for the trainer. If you do not like a trainer, you want to torture him, tell him to run an experiential learning workshop and tell him to do it on MS Teams. You will kill him or her, all right? Zoom has a lot of features that can be used, and we can actually use that. So the empathy comes to even the learners. For example, how tech savvy are they if you are going to create a situation? Like, for example, we have created certain games that run on Google, and then we have a challenge. When we take it to the banks have blocks. They cannot access Google, they cannot access Dropbox, they cannot access any of it. So they can't access that. So we need to take those things into consideration. So availability of device. There was one, we were doing a program for a client in Myanmar. We were all ready. They got no problem. They can access Google, they can access, and there's no issue at all. But then we have another problem. Most of them are head of branches whereby the company has given them a tablet, a Samsung tablet. And some of the activities that we created requires us to use mouse and a trackpad. So the moment you give them a tablet, now, you know how it feels, you know, you feel like pulling your hair, you know, it's really frustrating. So what we need to do, now that we understand that that's the only device that we have, now we need to change the design. We need to change the design and see what is that we can do that will make sense. No point complaining about the technology. If they say they can only use MS Teams, fine. But we have to change the design to meet the terrain. We got to walk the terrain of the customer or walk the terrain of the learner over there.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Manoran, for a very nice presentation. Now we are out of time now. So I invite Dr. Vinod Damlekar for his concluding remark.
Thank you, Dr. Dubey. Jaga, that was a fantastic presentation. I don't know how much I can cover to summarize what you said, but there are 4 or 5 aspects that have stuck with me, although there are another half a dozen which are there in my notes. You showed us the difference between an activity, what was a game and what was simulation. We sometimes tend to overflow one with the other. The Venn diagrams of 3 different circles that overlap on each other and confuse all of us. But I think you brought out the differences between the 3 forms of activity, 3 forms of learning experiences. The second issue that you talked about was that time as an ally and as a challenge, especially in corporate games where the corporate demanded that this has to be done. Their expectations were needed to be examined afresh in terms of the learner's needs. And then from there, we had to create the game. The third aspect that you spoke about was you spent a lot of time on this, on the design of the game, and covered various issues such as the learner's background and referred to prototyping, which of course got Marcin also asking, rapid prototyping could be a pretty complex exercise. I know I'm feeling this because I'm right now developing a project management game with India as a background. The background is a big fat Indian wedding. And we have been doing it for the last 6 months, and prototyping has failed every time. And every time we have learned more. Then, of course, you took us through a variety of examples, especially with respect to the questions posed by Dr. Mandal, Dr. Roy, and of course, Marcin. I am happy to see Dr. Dimitri Kautratse here. He is a mentor and guide to Elena. She's somewhere here. I had met him in 2004 or 5, I think, and I hope we will have him here as a speaker soon. As you spoke, I also learned that you like Pani Puri a lot. I hope you will come back to Indore sometime later this year and participate with us. We promise you'll get lots of it. Thank you for an excellent presentation of this. You see all the people on you, around you, the panelists, the people who asked you questions, they're all people who made this thing happen. There is Dr. Dubey and Dr. Mal and Dr. Rajawat and all. There are so many people whose names I can't take on. And I'm happy that this web series is taking off very well. There's so many people coming and listening and talking and asking those difficult questions and clarifying things. It is only when we talk to each other that is where the greatest learning happens. It is not really in playing the game, and not in listening to a teacher, not in going to a school. It is when we debate, when we challenge each other and say, I had this experience and can I ask you a question, etc. And I think we're doing a good thing by participating in experiences like the webinar. Thank you for being with us, Jaga. Thank you for making it a very nice session. You've set a very high standard for the webinar speakers to come, and I think there are 2 or 3 here in this panel group here. Claudia is there, and Martin is there, Inanna is there, and Hamata has joined us a little late. But I know that all of you, the future speakers, will make this fun and entertaining. And over to you, sir, Dr. Dar. I think you must have the last word.
Before Dr. Dar, can I just say thank you very much. This is the first time I have spoken to a large audience from the land of Bharat. So thank you very much. This is my ancestral land, so it's a bit emotional as well. So thank you so much. Vanakkam, namaste. Thank you.
It was a great session. Thank you very much, Dr. Jagdishwaran. And I'm happy to see friends from various countries. Dr. Marcin is there. And hello, how are you, Dr. Marcin?
Thank you. I'm fine, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. That was very engaging. Thank you.
We'll be organizing ISAGA 2021 in September this year, and I hope that by that time everything will be normalized, and all of us will be able to meet each other physically. That is face-to-face, in-person, face-to-face interaction will be possible. And other people, Dr. Hamada has also joined this time. I think he has joined first time. So far, we had to keep people connected. That is very important. So in a way, COVID has brought us closer in the sense that during this 1 year, about 10 months, it was a difficult time across the world, but we remained connected. So we thought that why not have it as a regular feature? We started this series, and number of webinars have been organized so far, and I'm sure that others will also come forward in future and present the webinar so that we learn from each other. And then finally, we'll be meeting in September 2021. Thank you very much, Dr. Jagdisharan. It was a good session, and I hope that you will remain connected. Please do attend the seminars which will be organized in future. So guest speakers should not close the relationship with their session only. Relationship must continue, and our interaction must continue. I'm happy that Elena has been attending continuously for 3-4 seminars. I think 3 seminars. It is her 3rd or 4th webinar which she has attended. Thank you, Elena. So over to my organizers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I once again thanks for all the wonderful session to the speaker, and thanks to all the panel members, and request all the participants to please fill the feedback form as mentioned in the chat box. Thank you very much.